not blowing, but it can sure be a significant part of it. But we get back to the NIMBY thing. And that's something that, I mean, I don't understand. I don't know, maybe it's selfish. I guess it is kind of selfish. But if people would think about, you know, if we are, let's just take the example of driving your car, and you've got a certain percentage of the gasoline that's in that car. I don't know how much. It's not a lot anymore, I don't think. But you've got a certain percentage of the gas that came from countries that aren't very friendly to us, or that came from countries that don't see civilization like we do, countries that have recently been involved in genocide within their own borders. I mean, you know, why would anybody not want to develop what oil and gas we have here and do it environmentally responsibly? Oh, the other thing is, we don't do it here, it gets done in places that don't have the kind of environmental laws that we do have here. And if they need to be stronger, fine, convince the legislature, which means a majority of the representatives of the people, and they get stronger and stronger. But we still have to deal with this whole NIMBY thing, and I'm not sure exactly how to get at it, but somehow we got to get at it. In fact, I think I've long thought that would be a great topic for a major symposium someplace in Montana, this whole NIMBY syndrome thing.
Pat, you want to say anything to that?
Well, just this, and I think maybe Lawrence and I would agree on this. I'm for alternative energy too, and Montana has got a lot of wind, but you don't have to be a strong environmentalist to believe this, Lawrence, and I know a lot of ranchers, including I'm sure you, who appreciate the scenery. In Montana, it's not just, you know, nice to have the scenery, it's a cash register. It's a cash register. Whenever it's possible, to not place these enormous turbines where they block beautiful views. I'd rather not see turbines on the Rocky Mountain front. I don't want to see them out there. Now, do I want turbines in Montana? Yeah, sure. And I think there are places for them, but I think we have to be careful where we put them. I recognize there are certain wind corridors, and if you don't put them there, you don't pick it up. But I guess I'll just say it this way. You know, probably at the end, what we might have left in Montana is the horizon. And I don't want to see it busted up.
Sir?
My name's Chuck Broughton, and I'm one of those people both of you gentlemen talked about when you started. I came here 21 years ago and adopted this wonderful state. I was really distressed when they decided to deregulate a public utility. I come from a state that did that over 50 years ago, and I begged politicians on both sides of the spectrum to look into the history of what happened. That state became almost, a civil war almost erupted. And it took 5 or 6 years for the Supreme Court to find the law that was passed there not constitutional. And I just was really distressed to see something be destroyed the way it was.
Any comments on that? Deregulation, either of the utilities or more broadly, the question?
Well, excuse me. America went through a great glut after Reagan of deregulation. You know, I mean, Reagan got elected on government is the problem, deregulation's the problem, unfunded mandates, and so on and so forth. It became part of our vocabulary.
The state Reagan came from is the one I'm speaking
of. Illinois. There you go. Some deregulation worked, some didn't. I used to pretty much, when I had a chance at the federal level, vote against deregulation. My theory, just quickly, is this. I think banks ought to be banks, and insurance companies ought to be insurance companies. I think big banks ought to be big banks, and little banks ought to stay little, and they shouldn't allow the big guys to eat them. It seems to me that power companies ought to continue to be power companies and not worry about cell phones. Yeah. So I like firewalls. Now, in some way, that's sort of anti-capitalistic. I understand that. But capitalism runs amok in deregulation, as we've seen in the last couple of years. I don't know how much you all lost in your investments, but I'm starting to walk with a limp.
Lawrence, want to add to that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I agree with what you said, that there was a big anti-regulation or deregulation movement that we went through for, well, to some extent, we might still be going through it, although we're sure interested in regulating the, one of the institutions you mentioned, the big banks and whatever. You know, you got to ask yourself, too big to fail, what does that really mean, and is that really good? I don't know. I guess I would just say, repeat what you said, and that is that some of it worked and some of it didn't.
Sir?
I think most of it didn't, personally.
Tate Jones of Missoula. I hear in tonight's discussion a lot of nostalgia for the era of Eisenhower, Mansfield, and Walter Cronkite. Yet, the world of our grandparents' youth was one of a highly partisan press, highly charged level of political agitation, violent at times, and strict party line adherence. And I'm sure that Senator Grosfeldt has ancestral memories of agrarian populists in central Montana, and Congressman Williams that of labor violence in Butte. Comment on a possible alternative 21st century Montana, that is that we're not as, and nation for that matter, that is we're not as mature a political culture as we like to think we are, and what we're returning is to the default setting of American political life.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Who's up for that?
Would you repeat the question? The question was so damn good, I want to hear it again. You want me to try? You want to go?
Nostalgia for the great old days that never were.
Yeah, I served in the legislature with a great, in the House back in the 60s, Lawrence, with a great newsman named Miles Romney. Some of you remember Miles from, he and his dad ran the Western News in, down the way here in Hamilton. And I remember Miles stood up one time, you know, he took the mic out of the desk in the House chamber and he said, "I'm not the man I used to be." Come to think of it, I don't think I ever was. That's sort of how American history is. We pine for those good old days. I'm not sure there were a lot of good old days. I do think that speaking of Walter Cronkite, I do think that the 24 news hour cycle requires the press to come up with the latest problem and turn it into a big headline, because they got to put ads around it. You know, they got to sell time around it. So the reports coming up, President Obama has gone to the White House bathroom, more later, you know, but so I think that's worse. I think the news, not because of newspapers, although the revenue problem is difficulty for them, but because of the 24-hour news cycle, we don't have it, that's not as good as it used to be. I personally think that until recently, politics had gotten a lot better than they were in early America. Corruption was less. There was more time spent by serious members of Congress trying to think things through over the past 30 years than I believe there had been previously. And as I said, but I want to emphasize it was a lot less corrupt now. Now, some people would say, oh, that's only because you decriminalized the corruption. And there's that legitimate point can be made. I'll stop there and let Lauren.
Well, I don't know that, I guess I hadn't quite thought of our discussion that way, that we were wishing for the good old times. I do think that some of the changes that we've made, and I talked quite a bit about term limits, that's one example, that I think was a mistake. But, you know, mistakes are made in politics. Mistakes are made in government by Congress, by legislatures, whatever. And hopefully, well, and usually, a lot of those mistakes get fixed when they're discovered. Something like term limits is a whole nother challenge. I'm not sure we can fix that one. But, you know, I look forward to a broadening economy, a technological economy, and it's growing. I mean, Bozeman, and I'm sure here too, are hotbeds of internet business and all that sort of thing. And I think that we have a great potential. Of course, that's going to mean more population coming to Montana, and some people like that and some don't. Right now, we've got a lot of vacant houses, we'd probably use a few more people.
Sir?
Yes, my name is Wynn Smith. I'm from Ravalli County. I genuinely appreciate your years of experience in the legislature. And we now know that we no longer are evaluating distance between towns. We're evaluating in miles instead of how many beers you drink. I would like to know what we do to change the legislature immediately so we don't have drunk drivers on our highways any longer. We mostly are aware of the fact that we are the worst state in the nation for drunk drivers and deaths, but we exceed the national average by more than twice. We've listened to the renegades too long in this state. We need to start listening to the silent majority. What do we do to change the legislator?
Well, that's, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I can tell you one experience that I had, which kind of goes to your question. One of the last, I think it was one of the last bills I carried, I don't know, I think it was probably in my last session, I don't remember for sure, but was to establish the 6-month treatment program that's now located in Warm Springs, for men anyway, and it's in eastern Montana for women. A very intensive treatment center. I mean, prior to that, somebody go to prison and they'd go to an AA meeting once a week in prison. I mean, what's that going to do? This is an intensive 6-month program. And if I remember right, it was for, I think it was for people with more than 4 DUI convictions. And when I presented the bill to the House committee, I got railed at, because why wait till more than 4? Why not put it at like 2? Well, the answer is unfortunate, but it's also fairly simple at that point in time. At greater than 4, it cost, I forget the number, let's just say it cost $20 million. If you went down to 3, it would have cost $100 million. If you went down to 2, it would have cost $500 million. I mean, it's a simple matter of economics. Now, I know there's been an awful lot in the press lately, all over the state, not just here, about this issue, because there are, I mean, it's ridiculous to read a thing in the paper that says somebody, you know, they've already had 10 convictions and they're still, I mean, there's something radically wrong there. And yeah, maybe treatment doesn't work for everybody. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they need to treat them like sex offenders. I mean, sex offenders have a lot tougher road. But I can just tell you that I don't think a little bit of treatment helps all that much. It's got to be very intense, and then it might help, but that's not cheap.
Pat, anything you want to add to that?
Well, just that it seems to me that we have to recognize who's the most addicted in Montana. State government to the revenue that comes from booze. That's the real addiction. Now, I don't know what we do about that. You want to pay more taxes? We'll stop it on beer and wine, then everybody gets it, you know, at a cheaper price, and you have to pay more taxes. So I don't know what you do about that part. With regard to the DUIs, it seems to me that we've got to be reasonable people. If we're going to advertise booze and the state's going to be addicted on it and it's part of the Montana culture, then it seems to me we have to say, well, okay, person gets picked up for the first time and they're a little bit drunk. You can have a couple of drinks and be over the limit, you know, so they're a little bit drunk. Well, you kind of lighten up on them and you give them a fine. And then if you catch them again within whatever it is, 6 months or 12 months, the fine's a little heavier. And then after that, it's the slammer. And after that, you lose your car for life. We got to start hammering the people that really, really do it. But I think we got to lighten up a little bit, particularly as a public pile-on thing, to the guy who had 2 glasses too many of wine at a neighbor's house and was driving the 3 blocks to his house and got picked up twice in a 2-year period. I think you lighten up on that guy and you beat the bejesus out of the real offenders.
I appreciate that particularly because I'm looking forward to having that drink, Pat, at the last question.
Bill Thackeray from Havre. Political phenomena is occurring in North Montana that may be affecting the rest of the state, and it partly derives from the term limit. We have a group that are taking their lead from Liberty University, graduates of Liberty University in political science, who have decided that they will put up a candidate for every vacancy that occurs as a result of term